First contact and cultural exchange. The day the Zorbian ship appeared in Earth's orbit was the day everything changed. It wasn't the sleek, saucer-shaped vessel of old sci-fi movies, nor was it the ominous, city-sized mothership of modern blockbusters. Instead, it looked like a giant, iridescent soap bubble, shimmering against the backdrop of stars. As the world held its collective breath, waiting for either destruction or salvation, the Zordians sent their first message. It wasn't a declaration of war or an offer of advanced technology. Instead, it was a simple request. We come in peace. We wish to learn about your games. Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant anthropologist specializing in the cultural significance of games, found herself suddenly thrust into the spotlight. As she stood before the United Nations, her hands trembling slightly, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steadier than she felt, "the Zordians' request presents us with a unique opportunity. Games are a universal language, a window into the soul of a civilization. Through them, we can establish a peaceful cultural exchange and learn about each other in ways that transcend mere words." The assembly murmured in agreement, and within days, a cultural exchange program was initiated. A team of human experts, led by Dr. Chen, was assembled to meet with the Zordian delegation. The Zorbian anthropologist, a being named Zix, looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a disco ball. Its translucent body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to correspond with its speech. As it hovered before the human delegation, its tendrils waving gently, Zix spoke through a translator device. "Greetings, humans," it burbled, its voice a mixture of bubbles and chimes. "We are most interested in your recreational activities. In our studies of your transmissions, we have observed many forms of what you call games. We wish to understand their significance." Dr. Chen stepped forward, a warm smile on her face. "We're delighted to share our games with you, Zix. We've prepared a variety of options, from ancient chess to modern video games. Where would you like to start?" Zix's body flickered with patterns of curiosity. "We have observed a game that seems to hold great importance in your culture. It involves the acquisition of property and the exchange of currency. We believe you call it Monopoly." Sarah blinked in surprise. Of all the games they had prepared, she hadn't expected the aliens to be interested in Monopoly. "Ah, yes, Monopoly. It's certainly a popular game. Though I'm not sure I'd say it holds great cultural importance." But Zix was insistent. "Our observations suggest otherwise. We have seen families gathered around this board, engaged in intense negotiations and strategic planning. It seems to be a simulation of your economic systems and social structures. Is this not correct?" Sarah hesitated, realizing the potential for misunderstanding. "Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. Monopoly is just one of many games we play. It doesn't necessarily reflect our actual economic systems or social values." But as she tried to explain the nuances, she could see that Zix was becoming more excited. Its bioluminescent patterns were pulsing rapidly, and its tendrils were waving in what she assumed was the Zorbian equivalent of enthusiastic nodding. "Fascinating," Zix exclaimed. "A game that simulates property ownership, financial transactions, and the accumulation of wealth. Surely, this must be a fundamental aspect of human society." Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but she was cut off by one of her colleagues, an economist named Dr. James Wong. "Actually," he interjected, "Monopoly does have its roots in economic theory. It was originally designed to demonstrate the negative aspects of concentrating land in private monopolies. In a way, it is a critique of certain economic practices." Zix's body glowed even brighter. "A game that not only simulates your economy, but also serves as a platform for economic critique and education. Truly, humans are a species of great depth and complexity." As the days went by, Zix became more and more fascinated with Monopoly. It insisted on playing game after game, analyzing every rule, every strategy, every quirk of the game's design. Sarah and her team tried to introduce other games, but Zix always came back to Monopoly. "I believe I am beginning to understand human culture more deeply," Zix announced one day, its body pulsing with what Sarah had come to recognize as excitement. "Your society is built on the principles of property acquisition, strategic resource management, and the constant risk of bankruptcy." How thrilling! Sarah felt a growing sense of unease. She tried repeatedly to explain that Monopoly was just a game, not a reflection of human society as a whole. But every time she did, Zix would counter with observations it had made about human behavior, both in the game and in the transmissions it had studied. "But do you not have entire television channels dedicated to the purchasing and selling of property?" Zix would ask. "And are there not many humans who dedicate their lives to the accumulation of wealth and assets, just as in the game?" Sarah had to admit that Zix wasn't entirely wrong, but she felt that the alien was missing important nuances. However, every attempt to introduce these nuances seemed to only reinforce Zix's belief in the fundamental monopoly-ness of human society. As the cultural exchange program continued, Sarah noticed that the other Zorbian delegates were becoming equally fascinated with Monopoly. They would gather around the board, their translucent bodies glowing with excitement as they bought properties, built houses, and sent each other to jail. One day, as Sarah was observing yet another Monopoly game between the Zorbian delegates, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "I believe we have learned much about humans from this game," one Zorbian was saying to another. "Perhaps we should create our own version to help us understand how to interact with them on a galactic scale." "An excellent idea," the other Zorbian replied, its body flashing with approval. "We shall call it Galactic Empires, and use it to guide our diplomatic and economic strategies with the humans." As the Zorbians excitedly discussed their plans, Sarah realized that a simple misunderstanding about a board game was about to shape the future of human-alien relations. She knew she should speak up, try once again to explain that Monopoly wasn't an accurate representation of human society. But as she opened her mouth to interject, a strange thought occurred to her. If the Zorbians were basing their understanding of humanity on Monopoly, wouldn't that mean they were fundamentally underestimating the complexity and capability of human civilization? And if that were the case, couldn't that potentially work to humanity's advantage? For the first time since the Zorbians had arrived, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this misunderstanding wasn't a disaster after all. Perhaps it was an opportunity. As she watched the Zorbians continue their game, their bodies glowing with excitement over hotels and railroads, she couldn't help but smile. The game was just beginning, and humanity had an ace up its sleeve. The Zorbians might think they understood humans based on Monopoly, but they were about to learn that in the game of galactic politics, humans were far from predictable. And Sarah had a feeling that the next round was going to be very interesting indeed. The Galactic Misunderstanding. The Zorbian ship departed Earth's orbit 3 months after it arrived, leaving behind a world forever changed. As Dr. Sarah Chen watched the iridescent bubble shimmer and vanish into the depths of space, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger game. She was right. 6 months later, Earth received an invitation. The Galactic Council, a confederation of spacefaring species that the Zorbians were part of, wanted to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity, and they wanted to do it through a game. Sarah found herself once again standing before the United Nations, this time with a holographic display of a game board floating beside her. It looked like Monopoly, but on a cosmic scale. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice echoing through the silent chamber. "The Zorbians have created this game called Galactic Empires. It's based on Monopoly, but with some interesting modifications." She gestured to the hologram, and the image zoomed in on one corner of the board. Instead of Go, there was a space labeled Home Planet. The properties were star systems, the houses and hotels replaced by colonies and space stations. Chance and Community Chest had become cosmic events, and Galactic Community, respectively. The Galactic Council has informed us that this game will be used as a framework for galactic diplomacy and trade negotiations, Sarah continued, her tone carefully neutral. They believe it will help foster understanding between species and provide a fair platform for interstellar relations. The assembly erupted into chaos. Shouts of disbelief, anger, and confusion filled the air. It took several minutes for order to be restored. Dr. Chen, the Secretary General, said once the room had quieted, "Are you saying that the future of human-alien relations will be determined by a board game?" Sarah took a deep breath. "In a word, sir, yes." The uproar that followed was even louder than before. In the weeks that followed, Earth was in a state of turmoil. Some saw the game as a ridiculous joke, others as an alien attempt at manipulation. Conspiracy theories ran wild, with some claiming that the real purpose of the game was to distract humanity while the aliens secretly invaded. But as more information came in from the Galactic Council, a different picture began to emerge. It seemed that the Zorbians' misunderstanding of monopoly had spread. Many species in the galaxy now believe that humans conducted all their affairs through complex, property-based board games, and rather than finding this primitive or silly, they were fascinated. "It's actually quite brilliant," Dr. James Wong explained during a top-secret briefing with world leaders. "Think about it. In a galaxy full of species with vastly different biologies, cultures, and technologies, how do you create a level playing field for diplomacy? A game." Sarah nodded in agreement. "The beauty of it is that success in the game doesn't necessarily translate to real-world advantages. It's more about demonstrating strategy, negotiation skills, and resource management. It's almost like a galactic job interview." The President of the United States leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "So you're saying we should take this seriously? Actually prepare to play this? Galactic empires?" "Absolutely," Sarah replied without hesitation. "But more than that, I think we need to embrace it. The galaxy thinks we're a species obsessed with these types of games, so let's be that species." And so, Operation Board Game was born. Around the world, governments began pouring resources into game theory, strategic planning, and negotiation tactics. Business schools added galactic empires to their curricula. Children were taught the game alongside chess and Go. But it wasn't just about preparing to play the game. Humanity had been handed a mask to wear on the galactic stage, and they were determined to wear it well. When the first interstellar diplomatic summit was held, the human delegation arrived with an entourage of game consultants and board game historians. They spoke passionately about the cultural significance of games in human society, weaving elaborate narratives about ancient gaming traditions. Sarah, who led the delegation, found herself improvising wildly at times. "Oh yes," she said to a group of fascinated aliens, her face a picture of earnest sincerity. "On Earth, we've been settling our disputes through games for millennia. Why, the Great Pizza Burger War of 1989 was resolved through an epic Scrabble tournament." The aliens nodded sagely, their various appendages scribbling notes. But even as humanity played up its game-loving image, they were watching and learning. They noticed how the Orcs, a species of hyper-intelligent gas clouds, tended to prioritize long-term strategies over short-term gains. They observed the Kutzli, crystalline beings from a heavy-gravity world, and their penchant for high-risk, high-reward plays. Most importantly, they realized that while the other species were focused on mastering galactic empires, they were overlooking crucial aspects of real galactic politics and economics. It was during the third round of a particularly tense game that Sarah had an epiphany. The Zorbian delegate had just landed on her Orion Nebula casino property, complete with a luxury space hotel. As the Zorbian bemoaned its bad luck and began calculating the exorbitant rent, Sarah's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about the actual Orion Nebula, a region of space rich in resources but politically unstable. While everyone was focused on the game board, real opportunities were being overlooked. As she accepted the game currency from the Zorbian, A plan began to form in her mind. Humanity had been handed a unique opportunity. While the galaxy was distracted by the game, Earth could make real moves on the galactic chessboard. That night, after the game sessions had ended, Sarah called an emergency meeting with the human delegation. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement, "I think it's time we started playing a different kind of game. One where the galaxy is our board, and the stakes are very, very real." As she outlined her plan, the other delegates listened with growing enthusiasm. They had been chosen for their gaming skills, yes, but they were also some of the brightest minds humanity had to offer. And now, they had a chance to use those minds to propel humanity to the stars. As the meeting concluded, Sarah looked out the window at the alien cityscape beyond. The galaxy thought it had humanity all figured out. They saw a species obsessed with games, predictable in their strategies and motivations. Little did they know, the real game was just beginning, and humanity was holding all the right cards. Rise of the human underdogs. As the years passed, humanity's reputation in the galactic community grew in an unexpected direction. They became known as the galaxy's premier game enthusiasts, their diplomats arriving at every function with an entourage of game theorists and strategic advisors. Other species found it quaint, even endearing. The humans were seen as harmless eccentrics, their obsession with games a charming quirk in the grand tapestry of galactic civilization. Little did they know that behind the facade of enthusiastic gamers, humanity was orchestrating a silent revolution. Dr. Sarah Chen, now the head of Earth's Galactic Relations Department, sat in her office overlooking New Shanghai's glittering skyline. The room was dominated by a massive holographic display showing the real-time status of human operations across the galaxy. To an outsider, it might have looked like an elaborate game board. In reality, it was the command center for humanity's galactic strategy. A soft chime announced the arrival of her team. They filed in silently, each carrying datapads filled with the latest reports from across human space. Sarah nodded to each of them in turn. Dr. James Wong, now Earth's chief economist, Admiral Yuki Tanaka, head of the fledgling human space fleet, and Dr. Quay Mosai, Earth's top xenobiologist. "Status report," Sarah said, her voice calm but edged with anticipation. James spoke first, his fingers dancing over his datapad. "Our economic initiatives are proceeding as planned. The Galactic Bank still thinks we're just really enthusiastic about our monopoly-based economy. They've approved another round of loans for our game-themed starports." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Those game-themed starports were, in fact, state-of-the-art trade hubs and military bases, disguised with a facade of casinos and game halls. Admiral Tanaka cleared her throat. "Fleet production is ahead of schedule. We've managed to classify our warships as game piece manufacturing facilities. The Galactic Council's regulatory body didn't look twice at them." "Excellent," Sarah nodded. "And our scientific progress, Quaim." The xenobiologist grinned. "You're going to love this. Remember how we convinced the Zorbians that our particle accelerators were just oversized roulette wheels? Well, we've made a breakthrough in FTL technology. We're now capable of jumps 30% farther than any other known species." Sarah leaned back in her chair, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. Humanity had taken the underdog role forced upon them and turned it into their greatest strength. While other species saw them as harmless game addicts, humans were quietly advancing in leaps and bounds. But their clever maneuvering hadn't gone entirely unnoticed. Reports had been coming in of increased scrutiny from some of the more suspicious galactic species. It was time to reinforce their cover. "The Galactic Empire's championship is in 3 months," Sarah said, changing the subject. "I think it's time we showed the galaxy just how seriously we take our games. James, I want you to lead our team this year." James blinked in surprise. "Me? But Sarah, you're our best player. You've led us to victory in the last 3 championships." Sarah shook her head. "Exactly. We've been winning too consistently. It's time to shake things up, keep them guessing. This year, we're going to lose." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Their victories in galactic empires had been a point of pride, a way to assert humanity's relevance in galactic affairs. But Sarah was right. Maintaining their image as game-obsessed underdogs was crucial to their long-term strategy. As her team left to make preparations, Sarah turned back to the holographic display. She zoomed in on a particular sector of space, one that had been the subject of much debate in recent Galactic Empires games. The Epsilon Cluster, a resource-rich but hotly contested region. In the game, humanity had been fighting tooth and nail to secure properties in the Epsilon Cluster. In reality, they had been quietly establishing mining operations and research outposts in nearby, overlooked systems. By the time the other species realized the true value of these worthless areas, humanity would have a solid foothold. Months passed, and the galaxy watched with bated breath as the Galactic Empire's championship unfolded. True to Sarah's plan, the human team, led by James, put up a good fight, but ultimately lost to the Xorxians, a race of gaseous beings known for their long-term strategic thinking. The galactic media had a field day. Humans dethroned. Headlines blared across the galaxy. There was much speculation about how this loss would affect human standing in galactic affairs. Little did they know that as the championship trophy was being presented to the Xorxian team, a human fleet was quietly establishing a major base in the outskirts of Xorxian space, masked by an elaborate cloaking system developed in those game piece manufacturing facilities. But not everyone was fooled by humanity's act. Zix, the Zorbian anthropologist who had first introduced humanity to the galactic stage, had been watching Earth's progress with growing suspicion. In a secure communication to the Zorbian High Council, Zix expressed its concerns. "There's something not quite right about the humans," it burbled, its bioluminescent patterns flickering with worry. "Their actions in the game don't always align with their real-world movements. I fear we may have underestimated them." The High Council dismissed Zix's concerns. "You worry too much," they told him. "The humans are exactly what they appear to be, a young, game-obsessed species finding their place in the galaxy. Their loss in the recent championship proves it." Zix wasn't convinced, but it held its peace. It decided to keep a closer eye on the humans, particularly on Dr. Sarah Chen. There was more to this species than met the eye, and Zix was determined to figure out what it was. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Sarah stood before the United Nations, delivering her annual report on humanity's galactic status. The mood in the chamber was somber, many still smarting from the loss at the championship. "Distinguished delegates," Sarah began, her voice strong and clear. "I know many of you are concerned about our recent loss in the Galactic Empire's championship. Some fear this may diminish our standing in the galactic community." She paused, letting the murmurs of agreement wash over her before continuing. "I am here to tell you that nothing could be further from the truth. Our plan is working perfectly. While the galaxy focuses on our game performance, we are making real progress where it counts." With a gesture, she brought up a holographic display of human-controlled space. The assembled delegates gasped as they saw the true extent of humanity's expansion. Colonies, trade routes, and resource-rich territories spread out across the galactic map, far more extensive than anyone had realized. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah said, a hint of pride in her voice, "the real game has only just begun, and humanity is playing to win." As the chamber erupted in applause, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy still saw humanity as the underdogs, the quirky game enthusiasts, but that perception was about to change. The stage was set for humanity's next move, and this time, they weren't playing for imaginary properties on a game board. They were playing for the stars themselves. The turning point. The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with tension. Representatives from 100 different species shifted nervously in their seats, appendages twitching and tentacles curling. At the center of the chamber, A holographic display showed a massive asteroid hurtling through space, its trajectory a burning red line aimed straight at the heart of Zordian space. Dr. Sarah Chen stood calmly at the human delegation's podium, her face a mask of concerned attention. Inwardly, she was smiling. The moment they had been waiting for had finally arrived. The Zorbian representative, Zix, was addressing the council, its bioluminescent patterns flashing in distress. The asteroid will impact our most populous colony world in less than a solar cycle, it burbled. Our simulations show that the impact will cause an extinction-level event. We need the Council's immediate assistance. The chamber erupted into chaos. Species shouted over each other, proposing and dismissing solutions rapid-fire. Some suggested massive deflector shields. Others wanted to evacuate the entire planet. A few of the more militant races were calling for a preemptive strike to destroy the asteroid, heedless of the potential debris field such an action would create. Through it all, the human delegation remained silent, watching and waiting. Finally, the Xorxian representative, a shimmering cloud of sentient gas, called for order. Perhaps, it hissed in its sibilant voice, we should consult the Galactic Empire's rulebook. Surely there must be a protocol for such a crisis within the game framework. Sarah suppressed a sigh. Even now, with billions of lives at stake, the galaxy was still trying to fit reality into the confines of a board game. But this was the moment she had been preparing for. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the din. Esteemed colleagues, if I may make a suggestion. All eyes, stalks, and sensory organs turned towards her. Sarah took a deep breath and began to speak. While I appreciate the Xorxian representative's dedication to the game, I believe this situation calls for a more direct approach. If you'll allow me, I'd like to propose a solution. With a gesture, she brought up a new holographic display. It showed a detailed plan of action, complete with ship movements, resource allocation, and a timeline of events. What you're seeing is a coordinated response plan that utilizes the strengths of multiple species, Sarah explained. We propose using Xorxian gravity manipulation technology to slow the asteroid, Kutzli crystal focusing arrays to break it into manageable pieces, and human nanite swarms to process the debris into harmless space dust. The chamber fell silent as the various representatives studied the plan. It was comprehensive, efficient, and unlike anything they had seen before. It certainly wasn't part of any Galactic Empire's rulebook. Zix, the Zorbian representative, was the first to speak. This is remarkable, it said, its voice tinged with awe and a hint of suspicion. But where did this plan come from? It's not part of the standard game strategies. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. No, it's not. You see, while we humans do enjoy our games, we've always understood that real-world problems require real-world solutions. This plan is the result of years of scientific research, strategic planning, and interspecies cooperation studies that we've been conducting alongside our participation in galactic empires. The silence in the chamber deepened as the implications of Sarah's words sank in. The Xorxian representative was the first to connect the dots. You've been using the game as a cover, it hissed, its gaseous form roiling with agitation. All this time, we thought you were just enthusiastic players, but you were actually preparing for reality. Sarah finished for it. Yes, we understood from the beginning that while games can teach valuable lessons, they can't encompass the full complexity of galactic politics and crisis management. So we played along, all the while developing our true capabilities behind the scenes. The chamber erupted once again, this time with a mixture of outrage, admiration, and confusion. Some species felt deceived, others were impressed by human ingenuity. A few were simply trying to process this paradigm shift in their understanding of humanity. But there was no time for extended debate. The asteroid was still hurtling towards the Zordian colony, and a decision needed to be made. It was Zix who finally brought the council back to order. Colleagues, it said, its voice cutting through the chaos, We can discuss the implications of the humans' actions later. Right now, we have a planet to save. I move that we implement the human plan immediately. The vote was swift and unanimous. Within hours, ships from a dozen different species were mobilizing, following the plan Sarah had laid out. The galaxy watched in awe as the mission unfolded with precision and efficiency. Zorxian gravity wells slowed the asteroid's approach. Kutzlik crystal arrays, more powerful than any weapon the galaxy had seen before, sliced the massive rock into manageable chunks. And then, in a display that left even the most advanced species breathless, swarms of human nanites engulfed the debris, breaking it down at the molecular level and dispersing it harmlessly into space. As the danger passed and celebrations erupted across Zordian space, the mood in the council chamber was considerably more subdued. The galaxy had just witnessed the true face of humanity, and it was both inspiring and terrifying. Sarah stood at the center of it all, fielding questions from curious and wary representatives. She explained how humanity had used the misconceptions about their game-playing nature to their advantage, all while pushing the boundaries of science and technology. But why the deception? The Kutzli representative asked, its crystalline form shimmering with confusion. Why not simply share your advancements with the galactic community? Sarah's expression turned serious. History has taught us that when a less advanced civilization encounters a more advanced one, the results are often catastrophic for the less advanced group. We needed to understand the galactic political landscape to ensure we could protect ourselves and contribute positively to the community before revealing our true capabilities. As the implications of this sank in, Zix approached Sarah, its bioluminescent patterns a complex swirl of emotions. I always suspected there was more to your species than met the eye, it said quietly. I just never imagined this. Sarah nodded respectfully to the Zordian. Your initial misunderstanding of our culture gave us the opening we needed. But make no mistake, Zix. While we may have played our cards close to our chest, our desire for peaceful cooperation is genuine. We're not here to dominate, but to collaborate and help push the boundaries of what's possible. As Sarah spoke, she could see the attitudes in the room slowly shifting. The initial shock and wariness were giving way to curiosity and cautious optimism. Humanity had just proven that they were far more than game enthusiasts. They were problem solvers, innovators, and when the chips were down, saviors. The galactic landscape had shifted irreversibly. Humanity was no longer the quaint newcomer, but a major player with unprecedented capabilities. As Sarah looked out at the assembled representatives, she knew that the real challenge was just beginning. The game board had expanded to encompass the entire galaxy, and humanity was ready to play for real. A new galactic order. The years following the Zorbian asteroid crisis saw a dramatic shift in the galactic political landscape. Humanity, once viewed as a quaint, game-obsessed species, now stood at the forefront of technological innovation and diplomatic influence. The revelation of their true capabilities had sent shockwaves through the galactic community, prompting a period of rapid change and adaptation. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's first galactic ambassador, stood at the podium in the newly constructed United Galactic Assembly on Mars. The Grand Chamber, with its soaring crystal dome, offering a breathtaking view of the russet Martian landscape, was filled to capacity with representatives from hundreds of species. Distinguished colleagues, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. 5 years ago, we stood together and faced a crisis that threatened to destroy an entire world. Today, we stand together again, not in the face of destruction, but in the spirit of creation. She paused, looking out at the sea of diverse faces, appendages, and sensory organs, all focused intently on her. The Galactic Cooperation Initiative that we propose today is more than just a treaty or an alliance. It is a fundamental reimagining of how our civilizations can interact, grow, and thrive together. As Sarah spoke, holographic displays sprang to life around the chamber, illustrating the key points of the initiative. It was ambitious in scope, proposing everything from shared research and development programs to unified response protocols for galactic-scale threats. We've learned valuable lessons from our games, Sarah continued, a small smile playing on her lips. The strategic thinking, the resource management, the delicate balance of competition and cooperation. These are all skills that serve us well in the galactic arena. But we've also learned that real progress, real change, comes when we set aside the game board and face reality together. The chamber buzzed with murmurs of agreement and thoughtful discussion. Even those species that had initially been wary of humanity's deception were now listening intently, intrigued by the possibilities this new initiative presented. Zix, the Zorbian anthropologist who had first introduced humanity to the galactic stage, raised a tentacle to speak. Ambassador Chen, it burbled, its bioluminescent patterns flickering with curiosity. Your species has demonstrated remarkable adaptability and ingenuity. But how can we be sure that this initiative isn't just another layer of strategy in your game? Sarah nodded, acknowledging the validity of the question. A fair point. Zix. Trust is earned, not given. That's why a key component of this initiative is complete transparency. We're proposing the establishment of an interspecies oversight committee with rotating leadership and full access to all shared projects and resources. She gestured, and a holographic display shifted to show a complex web of interconnected nodes. Furthermore, we've designed the initiative in such a way that it becomes more effective, more beneficial to all involved, the more openly and honestly we collaborate. In essence, we're creating a system where deception becomes counterproductive. The Torxian representative, its gaseous form shimmering with interest, spoke next. This is all very impressive, Ambassador. But I must ask, what inspired this approach? It seems a far cry from the competitive nature of the games your species seem to favor. Sarah's expression turned thoughtful. You're right, it is different, but not as different as you might think. You see, we've come to realize that the greatest games, the ones that stand the test of time, are those that foster cooperation as much as competition. They challenge us to think beyond our immediate goals, to consider the long-term consequences of our actions. She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. In a way, you could say we're proposing to turn galactic civilization itself into the ultimate cooperative game, one where every player's success contributes to the success of the whole. The chamber fell silent as the assembled representatives pondered this perspective. It was a radical shift from the often competitive, sometimes adversarial nature of traditional galactic politics. Gradually, questions and comments began to flow. Species that had been historical rivals found themselves engaging in constructive dialogue about shared research opportunities. Others debated the finer points of resource allocation and crisis response protocols. As the session stretched into its fifth hour, Sarah stood back and observed with a sense of pride and wonder. The chamber had transformed into a hive of activity, with impromptu working groups forming to discuss various aspects of the initiative. Ideas were flowing freely, unconstrained by the rigid structures of the past. Zix sidled up to her, its tentacles waving in what Sarah had come to recognize as a gesture of admiration. I must confess, Ambassador, it said quietly, when I first encountered your species, I never imagined it would lead to this. You've turned the entire galaxy into your game board. Sarah chuckled softly. Not a game board, Zix. A playground. A vast, cosmic playground where every species can learn, grow, and reach for the stars together. As the session finally drew to a close, the mood in the chamber was one of cautious optimism. The Galactic Cooperation Initiative hadn't been officially adopted yet. There would be months of negotiations and refinements ahead, but a seed had been planted. A new vision of galactic society had been proposed, one that promised to break down barriers and open up unprecedented opportunities for all. Sarah made her way out of the chamber, fielding congratulations and follow-up questions from various representatives. As she reached the exit, she paused to look back at the bustling scene. The galaxy had expected humans to be simple game players, underestimating them at every turn. Instead, humanity had risen to become architects of a new galactic order. They had taken the lessons learned from their games: strategy, resource management, diplomacy, and above all, the ability to adapt and think outside the box, and applied them on a cosmic scale. As Sarah stepped out onto the Martian surface, the Earth hanging like a blue jewel in the dusty pink sky, she couldn't help but smile. The greatest game of all was just beginning, and humanity was no longer just a player. They were helping to write the rules. In the years that followed, the Galactic Cooperation Initiative would face its share of challenges and setbacks. There were skeptics to convince, logistics to work out, and unforeseen complications to navigate. But with each obstacle overcome, each breakthrough achieved, the galaxy moved closer to the vision of unity and shared progress that humanity had proposed. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between Galactic Council sessions and high-stakes negotiations, you might find representatives from a dozen different species gathered around a table, engaged in an intense game of Monopoly, or Galactic Empires. Only now, they played not just for fun or for status, but as a reminder of the journey that had brought them all together. In the end, humanity's great deception had led to an even greater truth, that in the vast game of galactic civilization, the real victory comes not from dominating the board, but from teaching everyone how to play together.